Hello, my name is Ali Yousefi. Welcome to the EasyRepro series. We're extending EasyRepro using XPath and the ADFS redirect login flow. We'll cover the login flow, including ADFS redirect, best practices for XPath, a demo using XPath in the login flow, and wrap with some references. So the login flow is generally the first area we begin to work with Selenium objects. This is due to the ADFS redirect or single sign-on page having a customized HTML. In the example below, we're passing in the login redirect event, which we're taking the driver from, setting to this variable D. And with the variable D, we have properties such as find element and wait for page to load. Find element is specific to Selenium, while wait for page to load is specific to EasyRepro. So this is a nice combination of working both with EasyRepro and with Selenium. So working with Selenium, we start to see we are going to have to navigate through HTML to find particular objects. Something that's very helpful is XPath, which we'll cover in a bit. Here's two examples of the exact same method. One that uses XPath directly with these hard-coded strings, and one that uses a static class called the app reference class. The XPath strings are nice when you're debugging and developing, but when you need to hand this off or extend, it's recommended to use a more static approach. So XPath has actually been around for quite a while, and it's not used just for HTML, but it's a way to navigate XML structured languages using a path expression. Typically, you'll work at either absolute or relative, which we'll show on the next slide. Relative is most commonly used by the EasyRepro framework, and it's recommended if you're going to extend. That allows you to search for attributes in a node, such as data ID, or the values such as text within a span node. XPath is also significantly faster than using a lambda expression to search the DOM. I've included an example below that shows how I could essentially search through the HTML using a lambda expression, and alternatively using XPath. The XPath performed at a much faster speed. So absolute and relative paths are shown below. As you see with absolute path, we go into the XML structure itself from HTML all the way down to this header 4 and bold object here. For relative, we can start to query where we could say any, in this case, any sort of tag that has a class that's called feature box. Inside of that, look for any tag that has a value of testing. As you see here, here's the current node. Here's a tag name like input or image. We have the select the attributes of the node and the attribute name, as well as the value. And here is the syntax described. Here's an example of EasyRepro using XPath. This is taken from the app element reference.cs file. And this is the business process flow. So using the next stage, I could see that it looks for a LI that contains an ID that's called process header stage. I could see for setting the active buttons, looking for a button that contains an attribute called data-id set active button. When you see this brackets with the word name, this means that a variable is going to get passed in that's going to be overwritten here. So now I'll demo how to work with XPath in the ADFS redirect login flow. Welcome to this demo of extending EasyRepro working with XPath in the login flow. In this example, you can see I have 3 different login flows here. One using the traditional login flow with a XRM URI, username, and password, and then 2 that require a ADFS redirect login method to be passed in. This is for what's typically called a single sign-on. So for each one of these, we need to create a method that has a signature that looks like this. So public void, and has a parameter login redirect event args with, we can call it args in our case here. So I have two, one that says ADFS login action and one ADFS login action without app reference. Since the focus of this module is on XPath, let's go ahead and look at the one without the XPath references. So in here you can see I am working with the driver from the passed in argument, and I'm doing things like finding an element using XPath here, which is great. XPath works very well for determining, like being able to query or search for something you may or may not know exactly what it is. So things like contains and likes and things like that are useful with XPath. So here with XPath, I can put in this hard-coded string. So I'm looking for a input tag that has an ID of txt username. And I'm doing actions to it such as clearing, sending keys, and so on. Now I'm looking for an input tag with ID of txt password, and again doing some actions here. So this works well. In fact, this works the same as the above method I'll show in a second, but the reasoning that I have another method is that I don't want to have to necessarily have this hard-coded string everywhere. So if something changes, say for instance, txt username turns into txt ID. Now I got to go in and replace txt username with ID, not only here, but anywhere else that it's referenced. Alternatively, I can provide something like this, where I have a hard-coded property, where the property has the same exact string behind it, but it's nicely hidden so that I only have to make the change in one place. This is very similar to what we do when we create the proxy classes with the CRM service util. So now I've opened up the app element reference.cs file. As you can see, I have app reference here. Here's a login that I made with my user ID, and login password. You can see user ID, login password. These equal to these strings here, which will now go to the elements page here. You can see I have the same string that I had before, txt username, txt password, txt username and password. But now if there's any change, I just have to make it in one place versus many. This is exactly how EasyRepro works with the Dynamics objects. As you can see, here's ones that were out of the box, such as grid, entity, command bar, global search. What's helpful about working with the app element reference CS file is that I can start to understand not only how is it referencing it, but get some ideas on how to query using XPath. So in this case, looking for a select tag that contains a data ID attribute with this name that's going to be passed in. That's going to have this .field control -checkbox -select. Other items like buttons, divs. You can even look for attributes such as role, labels, and so on. And this is representing the text value, so the value inside of this label node here. So that concludes this demo. Thank you very much. Finally, we'll leave with some references, including the EasyRepro GitHub repository and the blog post Test Automation in EasyRepro extending the EasyRepro framework.